I'm standing here knee-deep in digital water from the hit 2011 video game Skyrim, and I'm confused. Where did this river come from? I mean, it's flowing, right? So it's flowing from somewhere, and it's flowing to somewhere. But where? And where are we getting all this water from? Does it just shrink and expand at the whim of Todd Howard's mind? Or are there other water sources in the game that feed into these rivers like they do on Earth? If so, where do those water sources come from? In order to find the answers to these questions, I've devised myself a simple challenge. Starting in Riverwood, I'm going to follow the river all the way to its endpoint, and if any other rivers connect to it along the way, I'm going to follow those all the way back to their source points. Let's begin. So as you can see, standing on the bridge in Riverwood, the river is very clearly flowing this way, which I believe is north. So wherever we're headed is that way. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to follow this here river all the way to wherever it ends. And I'm sure it's going to take a while, but that's okay. Now, immediately, something interesting has happened. Look at this. This creek feeds into the river, and this waterfall feeds into the creek. But what feeds the waterfall? Well, I'm gonna find out. Maybe we could just do the old classic Skyrim jump. Almost. Okay. So check this out. This is the start point. At first glance, this spontaneous water generation coming out of a nondescript side of a mountain seems unrealistic. It seems very video gamey. But it turns out this actually isn't that uncommon in the real world. Now, obviously, the visual fidelity of Earth is a lot higher than the visual fidelity of a game like Skyrim. But because of things like groundwater seepage, underwater channels can form, which can become underwater streams, which will then find the path of least resistance, and then that water will come out the side and create a waterfall. And in fact, one of the most common causes of this type of seepage is glacial melting, snow melt. We know that Skyrim has lots of snow. We even know that this mountain, if you go up it, is covered in snow. So it actually kind of makes sense. That's pretty neat. It is fun that there's a little bit of thought put into the fact that the water, you know, obviously it turns into sort of white water when it goes over a waterfall, but also you can see the tops of the water splitting when they hit the rocks, which is fun. It's also that weird little, whatever the f that is. Just like a little splurt. So we've come all the way down here, and now we have hit a split in the river. We have another pretty big river creek thing that is now also contributing. Okay. This is going to be more complicated than I thought, so I'm going to make a diagram. This line is going to represent the river that we're on. It's just going to be one straight line, like a metro line or some sort of train situation. You guys might be familiar with that if you're from Europe. This dot represents Riverwood, where we started, and then these little blue lines are going to represent small tributaries, like streams and creeks. We'll also use big, thicker blue lines to represent other rivers that connect, and a variety of other symbols as we need them. I just want you to know that this diagram is what's making this video take so long. If you want to see more diagrams like this, support me on Patreon. Now, back to the journey. It's White Run's Sewage Creek. All this, or maybe just drainage. I shouldn't assume it's sewage. But it continues further back here. It gets a lot lighter, and it looks like the source of that whole thing is White Run's drainage sewage system. So that whole creek is man-made. It's a totally artificial feature of the land. That's interesting. In addition to all of this, if you actually go inside of Whiterun, which is a walled city, you can find the source of that water all the way up at the top of the mountain where the castle is. The castle is surrounded by this big moat, which then flows down all of these water features into a variety of fountains and eventually out of these drainage tunnels. Now, all of that is to say that all the times you've played Skyrim and you've walked near this little creek and you've thought to yourself, wow, what a beautiful creek there. That it's all runoff. It's all like sewage probably from Whiterun that you're just admiring that then flows into that river. You'll notice as we continue walking, we're actually going down in elevation a lot. And that's not uncommon when it comes to rivers because it tends to be that things melt and gravity pulls them down. So it's probably the case that we're going to continue going lower and lower in elevation. But I'm curious, because this is a video game, if they ever sort of screwed that up. You know, if they ever accidentally made a river go uphill. But whatever, I don't know. I'm not a hydrologist. Holy crap. This is a large waterfall here. Oh dear. Look at that. That's pretty amazing. We have a really large river combining with it right here. My God. I don't even know if I want to know where that comes from. Just kidding. Yes, I do. Following this particular tributary back to its source was very difficult. Well, I mean, it wasn't very difficult. I was playing a video game, so I'm not working on an oil rig. But I had to jump a lot, is basically what I'm saying. We had to climb up a mountain, past a bunch of very beautiful waterfalls and cliffs and things like that, and eventually it leads here. here to this unassuming tiny little spot with another one of these waterfalls that just generates an infinite amount of water that then spills down and creates all of those cascading effects. I'm honestly not totally sure what I find so interesting about all of this. I was trying to think of it while writing the sort of loose outline of the script for this video. And obviously there's a piece of it that I just like looking at things in games that we weren't supposed to look at. But I do play games normally. I do enjoy games like a normal person enjoys them. Please believe me. But there's something about looking at a river and knowing that that river starts somewhere and ends somewhere that gives me this really interesting feeling. Maybe it's because I struggle with like visualizing other places that aren't in front of my face. It's like I'm still working on object permanence in a way, emotionally. But if you also think it's interesting, tell me why. Maybe it will help me figure it out. But in the meantime, I have a river to follow. All right, we've come to another joining river. Got a big waterfall that feeds it coming down. So this has got to be coming from either multiple smaller rivers, or it's coming directly from like some kind of big lake or something like that. Ah, Christ. Okay. So it's actually coming from multiple bigger rivers. Okay, all right, okay. I feel like this is going to be the shorter one to go look at, so let's go see. This hike was also extremely long and annoying, and the river also split up again. Now, one of these paths does go thousands of feet up into a tiny spot on the mountains where, once again, you find just another one of these little generating points, so that's always fun. But the other path is a much larger river, and if you follow that back, you actually end up in the town of Ivarstead, or Ivarstead, whatever it's called. So that was a fun surprise. Okay, well, here we are now in Ivarstead. This river is powering this wheel. It's cool to think that this river, this body of water... Ah, fuck. God damn it. I hate this game. I love this game, but I hate this game. Okay, what was I saying anyway? I think it's really cool to think that this river, this body of water, is connected to the same body of water that is rotating the lumber mill in Riverwood. That's pretty cool to think that, like, at the end of the day, these two locations are interlinked in that way. And also something interesting about this is, check this out right here. Right here in Ivarstead, the river splits. On the left side, the water calmly flows to the left, and on the right side it rapidly starts flowing to the right, and then it turns into this gigantic torrent. This exact thing, this exact moment, is one of the reasons why I was so interested in making this video. The idea that if you really dig in, eventually you're gonna find the spot that the game gives up on trying to be the world that it's trying to be, and instead it has to admit to you that it's just a video game. This is the video game telling us that it's a video game. For all the effort that they put into having these tributaries and these combining rivers and these water features that make sense, at the end of the day, eventually, they just had to go, fuck it, just make water, it's fine. So in that way, it kind of feels like having a secret little handshake with the developer, but it also feels like having a secret handshake directly with the video game. I can't believe we found the generative source of one of the rivers in Skyrim. That's crazy. Like, they didn't even put one of those little hand-wavy explanation waterfalls out of the side of the mountain here. It just starts right in this spot. I'm in awe of the power of video games. Anyway, if you follow this new downstream path, it eventually ends up into a gigantic lake. And a very cool thing happens. If you stand on this bridge, you'll see this small creek suddenly get huge and gigantic for no explicable reason. Another way that the game just admits that it can't justify everything, and sometimes it just has to make a big river, and that's just the way it goes. All of this water just comes from that one little spot. Now, that does beg the question, is there any way that this can make sense from a hydrological perspective? Well, it's kind of a tough question to answer. This is a good thing. We don't need there to be an underlying gravity model that interacts with a liquid physics engine. It's a piece of three-dimensional art, so the rivers don't have to have sensible beginnings and sensible ends. But they do have to have beginnings and ends. So where's the end of this river? Well, this big giant lake drains in two places. One of them goes off the side and ends up being its own separate river that goes all the way to the city of Riften. We're not doing that right now. That's a whole other hydrological exploration. But the other path turns into a few waterfalls that eventually reconnect and combine with the original river that we were following. So now we're back on course. Thankfully, things got a little bit simpler from here on out. There weren't any more tributaries that we had to keep track of or explore, and we even got to see a man who had recently been eaten by a bear. Damn, a bear got in this person's home and ate them alive. I just killed the bear. As we get further into the northern latitudes, despite the descending elevation, ice begins to form along the river, things start to get much colder, and we arrive at the city of Windhelm. This city is surrounded by a giant moat, which is largely just the river that we've been following, but it's also joined by another separate river, which means we need to figure out where this river comes from. Now, thankfully, we don't have to go too far, because just a few minutes upstream, we find this gigantic lake that is surrounded by snowy mountains and has no other contributing tributaries, so we can surmise that the snow from these surrounding mountains melts into this little valley and then flows down towards Windhelm as a river. Now, once you're at Windhelm, you're pretty close to the coast of Skyrim, so all you have to do from this point is just walk a little ways north, and eventually you get to sort of a river delta type area, and the strength of the flow of the river gets swallowed up by just the volume of water outside in the Sea of Dead Souls or whatever. I think it has a name. So this is where the river ends. That humble little creek from Riverwood that created cascading waterfalls and brought us so much joy and adventure, that had so many contributing water partners. It all ends here and just joins the giant singular mass that is the ocean, which is like what happens to us when we die, which is a good thing, probably, hopefully. I guess we'll see. So great, we made it. But we still have no idea where this river begins. Well, thankfully, that's not a very hard question to answer. We just have to head back to Riverwood. And you know, it turns out that not too far upstream of Riverwood is a gigantic lake, which begs the question, is this it? Is this the start of all that water? All of that hubbaloo that happens downstream, is it all just the fault of this lake? Well, that really depends if there are any rivers feeding into this lake, or if it's just its own thing. And the only way to find that out is to walk around the whole thing in a circle. So let's do that really quick. I'll just speed it up for you. I'll save you some time and tell you that no, there is nothing else feeding into this lake. However, the lake does split off into another river, but it is itself the source for that river. Now the question becomes, where does that river go? I think I will leave that one to you. Following these rivers has been one of the most reinvigorating experiences I've had with Skyrim in a long time. It has been so fun and so grounding to do something so explorative and arbitrary that I don't really want to ruin the fun by putting it in a YouTube video. So if you want to know where this river goes, boot up your copy of Skyrim, meet me by this sawmill. Oh my god, you're already here. You look exactly like how I imagined all my fans would look. The heart of what I wanted to get to with this video is this. I love video games. Thanks for watching.